Basic. It's an interesting word, isn't it? I don't really know what it means. Take this mask, that's pretty basic, but then it's got something printed on the side, so there's more basic ones around. And then there's my phone, which is definitely not basic, but then there's now a new version, so maybe it is. And what if we scale that up a bit, maybe to the size of a car? The Volkswagen Golf's quite basic, but then it's not basic compared to a Dacia Sandero. But a Dacia Sandero is positively incredible compared to a Vauxhall Cavalier. And then what about rear-wheel drive supercars? Are they basic? Are they a basic thing? And then electric cars, they're like the height of advancements, and especially electric sports cars. Could there ever really be a basic electric sports car? Let's find out.
Yes, the Taycan, the super-fast tech fest from Porsche that shows upstarts like Tesla that actually us old OEMs can build electric cars, thank you, has gone basic. This is the new entry-level Taycan, usurping the 4 and 4S in the range.
Now we already know we have a bit of a thing for the more basic versions of cars. Take last summer when Sean drove the base spec Carrera version of the 911 and absolutely loved it, or when Laura last year drove the Morgan Plus 4, which just feels a little bit more connected to you than the Plus 6 with a manual gearbox. It's sort of a bit like the saying that Colin Chapman always seemed to have about the fact that the best way forward for Lotus was to simplify and add lightness. Now the way that Porsche have made this more simple, or a more basic version, is very easy. They've just removed the motors from the front. This only has one set of motors powering it. The Turbo S that we've driven before, and the Turbo, and the 4, and the 4S all have motors front and back, giving you four-wheel drive and really pushing you on. This just sends all of its power to the rear, leaving the front wheels for steering. The other effect that removing the front motors has is to reduce weight. It's not massive, let's be honest. This thing still weighs a little over 2 tons, but 90 kilograms has been removed. So Colin Chapman would be pleased, because I mean, in reality, we have simplified here and added some lightness.
You might think that must mean this has been completely stripped of half of its power, and well, you'd be partly right. Where the Turbo S will attempt to rip your skin off by hitting 62 miles per hour in just 2.8 seconds, the rear-wheel drive will get there in a more sedate 5.4. But, let's be honest, 5.4 is still pretty rapid. That's partly because rather than the Turbo S's 761 Newton meters of torque and 650 horsepower, the single motor car has just 357 Newton meters, which is pretty much a slice in half. Actually, there are 2 versions of this Taycan, one with a 79 kilowatt hour battery and one with 93. The former will give 326 horsepower and the latter 380. The run to 60 is unaffected by the change in battery, and both will go on to hit 143 miles an hour if you have the space. The main difference between the two is range. With 93 kilowatt hours, you have a theoretical range of 300 miles. With 79, you're looking at 268.
Now in here, it still manages to be Taycan as you know. The base car is £70,000 and this one is a little bit more than that. It's quite a lot more than that actually, but you've still got Taycan interior in the way that it's been done. I've spoken and written about how I feel about touchscreens, but if you're going to have so many touchscreens, this is the way you do it. I've got 4 here, 3 of which are decidedly for me, and one of which is for the passenger. There's one that's all digital in front of me, there's one here and there's one down here, but it is just so nicely integrated in that way that Porsche do manage to do with these things. And the fact that we've come down from a Turbo S, which is about £130,000, to this £70,000 car and still find everything just exactly as you would expect is, well, it's just a mark of how fluid the word basic really is. The most interesting thing I found is the way it delivers its power. Now, the Turbo S and the big four-wheel drive versions of the Taycan, they, as soon as you stick your foot down, desperately want your stomach, liver, lungs and everything to be in the back of the car while you remain in the front. This one, if you're going from a standstill, is more, it feels much more sedate. Where this one will still excite, where that big feeling, that big whack of torque that we always talk about with electric cars still comes, is in the mid-range. Say you're sort of 40, 50, 60 miles an hour and you want to change lane, then you still get that big shove. It can be a bit of a surprise actually, because the first time you pull out and put your foot down, you're not really going to be absolutely blown away. When you're in the mid-range doing 40 like now, it will really, really still knock you back, even though it's not sending power to all four of those wheels. Is this still a performance car? Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. Yes, it definitely is. Once you start driving this car, you realise that it is a lot of fun to drive. Taking the motors away from the front has freed up the front wheels to really just do their better job, which is steering the car, turning you left and right. And you can feel that when you pitch the car in and you feel the nose dig, even when you've got a little bit of throttle. There's no massive hint of understeer. There's no even tiny hint of understeer, if I'm honest. Then it is genuinely rear-wheel drive, and you can feel that if you stamp the throttle in the mid or exit of corners. Because this isn't a hooligan, this isn't some absolute monster that has had most of its grip removed. It is still an extremely capable car. It's that nice balance between the two. It's got 4 different driving modes in the Taycan, just like the normal. You've got range mode that I'm in right now while driving through a town. That limits your top speed, drops the car down. You've got normal mode, which is sort of like comfort. It's your one for wafting around or driving normally. Sport mode is your fast one. And then there's Sport Plus mode, which is sort of, on some cars it would be called track mode. Sport Plus mode is interesting in this because it does pop the suspension down a little bit. It gives you a whole lot more power, and there's an overboost there, I think, which pushes it up over 400 horsepower. Sport Plus mode adds a noise, and it's a noise that's been tuned to sound how Porsche believe an electric sports car would sound. But it's a sort of whine without being a whine. So when you're driving around normally in the Taycan, you hear the whine of the electric motors, the whine that legally has to be there when you're driving an electric car anyway. It's designed to be sort of a futuristic noise, and it's quite hard to explain. It's quite enjoy it actually. Put a sport mode there is. It's just, so it does sound a little bit like, deep down, there's a bass note of an engine, but then it's been, I don't know, futurized, if that's a word. If this is what electric sports cars are going to be like, then I am fine with that. It's so hard to describe this car in ways that don't sound awfully cliched, but it really does feel like, it feels like this might be sort of the first electric car for the enthusiast.
The Taycan rear-wheel drive isn't the last word in driving fun. It isn't the first word in performance either. It is, though, the first pure EV I've driven that feels like it's for someone like you or I. It feels like a testbed for the next generation of Porsche sports cars. The cars that have to come after the Cayman and the 911, when petrol has been consigned to history and everything is electric. As technology progresses, batteries should get smaller, and cars like this should get more agile, more nimble, more like the cars Porsche started making. At that point, we might all begin to forget why we worried about EVs in the first place.